Here we are.
All right. Happy Friday, everybody. We're live, and that must mean that it's Friday at 3 o'clock in the Contractor AI Club. I'm Adrian Park. With me today, again, as always, Jay Carter, the System Whisperer. And we're gonna start a little different today. So anyone who's well, anyone who's read Patrick Lencioni, who's a kind of a brilliant management guy, he has this thing where there's these 6 questions you ask a person you don't know very well. And even though Jay and I know each other pretty well, you guys don't know us as well. And so we're going to answer those questions to start off today. And I'll go first. So the 6 questions are, and this is actually, by the way, this is a great way to, in a professional setting, to, if you're meeting like a subcontractor or a provider, a vendor of some sort, you want to get to, someone you're going to do a lot of business with, great way to get to know them. But we're going to do it here so you guys can get to know us. So the questions are: hometown, how many siblings, favorite childhood hobby, most challenging childhood experience, first job, worst job. All right. So I'm going to go first. So my hometown is Newcastle, Pennsylvania, which is an hour north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right over the Ohio border. About an hour and a half south of where I am now. I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania. I have one sibling. Her name is Marissa, and she's 2 years, almost 2 years younger than me. Favorite childhood hobby. I guess that would, yeah, right. Would probably depend on like what part of childhood. So I was obsessed with basketball in my like junior high and high school years, but childhood feels like that's younger. When I was a kid, like, grade school, so I grew up in Florida, and there was this undeveloped stuff behind our house, like undeveloped air, like woods and stuff, but it's Florida. So it's basically like swamp. And we would play, it's like, you don't realize like certain things. Like I didn't realize that when I was a kid, I played in a swamp, because when it would rain a lot, that where we played would fill up with water. And like there were snakes back there. Like there was, if I can't even count the number of times I saw snakes. Now they were like black racers and stuff. They weren't poisonous, most of them, but like, I mean, we would ride our bikes by same alligator that would just sun itself right out, like right by this retention. And that was normal, right? Anyway, so favorite childhood hobby was probably playing in the swamp. And then most challenging childhood experience, there were two. I'm not sure which one. I know which one felt more challenging. So I had a blood disease when I was 6 years old, and that blood disease, like my blood platelets were being eaten by my white blood cells, which causes you to bruise very easily. So, so what that meant was, like, I'm 6, 7 years old, right? So I mean, you're a 6-year-old boy playing, and then one weekend my parents went away, and I was playing with my friend in his pool, and rough housing is what we used to call it, like boys do. And I went to school the next Monday covered in bruises, and they thought I was being abused by my parents, and sent me to the equivalent of like Child Protective Services today. Wow. The HRS. Anyway, but that's not the one that stands out as the most. The one that stands out as the most challenging is I had debilitating asthma, and I remember just like not being able to breathe as a kid. That was, even though the other one was probably more life-threatening, the thing that was probably the most traumatizing was not being able to breathe. First job was my dad told me when I was really young, like second, third grade, because when I was a kid, kids got at least in where my peers got allowances, and I was like, oh, this is great. Parents give you a little bit of money, you can buy some candy, buy some whatever, some gum, for the arcade. And my parents were like, no, you're not getting an allowance, you'll have to work. So, so my dad drove me over to his friend's house, and I got paid $5 a week to mow their yard. I was like 8 years old, 7, 8 years old. I was a kid, like a kid. And worst job was probably in college. And again, this was this more the circumstance, although it was a pretty rough, it was rough for physically. So I was working two restaurants, and this is like my junior year in college, two restaurants. And then I got, just, I don't know, stupid and young and stupid. I got a job working for a snowplow contractor. But I mean, I was a college kid, so there I was riding with the guy who was driving and running the plow, and then I would jump out with the shovel, grab a shovel out of the truck bed, and do all the aprons, right? Well, in Minnesota. So
Mm.
what ended up happening, like a couple different weekends, is I would wait tables at one of my restaurant jobs, finish at 11, go home, and because you would plow basically between 12 and 6, in the morning. So then I had to drive like 30 miles south of the city where I lived and where the school was and where my jobs were, and plow and like shovel all night, and then go home, work a double shift, and then go. And that was just like, I've never been, at the time, I'd never been so physically exhausted as like working a 12-hour day in the restaurant and then going and working 6 to 8 hours. And then I remember one weekend we just got dumped on, and I had to work like through the Saturday. And then I went to the restaurant, and then I came back and I had to plow the next night into Sunday. And I literally worked like 3 days straight with like an hour, 2 hours of sleep. And I'll just never forget how much I hated that fucking shoveling job. Although I did do it for a full season, but I didn't come back the next season because I was like, it's not worth whatever the 10 or 12 bucks an hour is getting paid under the table. Anyway, so hometown, Jay.
My hometown was Newmarket, Ontario, and
Which
number of
is where compared
that's
to where you're at?
like
You're near Toronto.
20. Yeah, I'm right now. I'm like 45 minutes from Toronto, but Newmarket's like 20 minutes from Toronto. They're right in line, so it was more of a city,
Okay.
and now I'm more towards the lake, the country. So both beautiful places. Had a great childhood growing up. Well, somewhat great childhood growing up in Newmarket. Good city.
Okay. Number of
Siblings.
siblings.
Yeah, I have a sister named Jamie, and
Okay.
we're very close in terms of age. So she's like 10 months younger than me. And
Okay.
then favorite
Wow.
childhood hobby. Yeah. Favorite childhood hobby would definitely have to be hockey. So I played competitive
Okay.
hockey throughout my childhood and into my teens. So basically all I remember from my childhood predominantly is hockey. Um, Most challenging childhood experience. My mom, growing up, was very sick. She had the lymphoma cancer, so a
Hmm.
lot of my childhood was spent between hockey. And one of the coolest memories I have of her, was her being sick but still making it to all the games. So I mean, like
Wow.
radiation and like chemotherapies and like, and I get a lot of my strength, and the reason I am who I am is a lot to do with how she never let me down through all of that. And
Hmm.
when you're a kid, you don't really understand, but I mean,
Right.
throughout my childhood, I began very aware of like how bad things were with her illness, and we kind of watched it. But she never wanted me to take, like, she didn't want pity. She always hid it, and so that was a difficult childhood experience for sure. My first job. So you're gonna laugh about this one.
Okay.
My first job was actually my only job, and it was as a roofer. So
Get
instead of,
out.
I'm not
You're
kidding,
kidding.
I've never done anything else.
What?
Well, I've been a coach and I've been like later in life, but as a kid,
Right. Holy shit.
my uncle owned a roofing company,
Yeah.
and instead of going to summer camp when I was like 11, I
Yeah.
was introduced to roofing. And at the time, it was like,
Huh.
wow, this is great. And
Yeah.
the truth be told, it was the money that kind of drew me into it. And because I was getting paid as more than like a minimum wage. It's a hard,
Yeah.
nasty job, but the fact that I was able to do it, and I was a big kid, and it paid good benefits because I started going up and up in hockey because I was literally out lifting 100-pound bundles and like just
Right. It was like a
working.
workout.
Yeah. Yeah. So I dropped a bunch of weight and got like really into shape. And, so when I look back on it, it for all the things it was, it taught me a lot of really strong values and, you know, I just stuck with it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's taken care of me basically my entire life.
no
So,
kidding.
I mean, that was my very first job and I kept that one for, until I became a contractor and a roofing contractor. And the rest is after that coach and we've been a COO before, so if but my very earlier years were definitely roofing. My worst job, um well, so now that you know my secret, I would have to say roofing was my worst job, by far and away. So I mean, there's no arguing that. It was tough at times, especially when as I got more and more into it, doing that 7 days a week or 6 days a week is tough, right? But it makes you
Yeah.
tough. So, I mean, I'm grateful for the experience, and I did that for 10 years, until I managed
Wow.
to move
Did you
into
really?
well,
So you were on the
here's the
tools for
story.
10 years. Wow.
Yeah, so I actually started the business, believe it or not. I started the business. My mom, like I said, was very sick and when I was growing up. But
Yeah.
she was given terminal diagnosis when I was going through high school.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, like we were, blue middle class, like, so it really got to the point where she couldn't work, and then there was only other option I had was to go to work. But we made a good deal with the school, so I was able to stay in school part-time and then work. So at the time it was a really cool program that I wish they would promote a little bit more, but it was the OYAP program. And so basically you get to go and learn a trade, and it worked out really, really good. So, but instead of, because I had been doing roofing since I was like 11, 12. I was already
Wow.
at the point I would do it after work, like after school and everything else. And like we got paid piecework. So I was making like, 15, 2,000 bucks a week sometimes. So like it was hard going back to high school anyways.
What
Um,
as
yeah,
a
yeah.
teeny?
When
Holy
I was
cow.
when I was when I was 15, honest to God, and I
That's
just, I was in a
insane.
newspaper article, but so
Especially for back then. We're talking about
yeah.
that's not even inflation adjusted.
Well, this is why it
Holy
made it so hard to
crap.
go back. So like I
Oh my
remember
God.
guidance having to add, like having to push to get this program. They didn't have it. They, like, the Ontario government had it, but they didn't have it in my high school. There wasn't an offered. So given the circumstances, they're like, okay. But my guidance counselor, I'll never ever forget. He was a great guy too. Totally supported me, and nothing bad to say about him. But like part of his statements to me was like, you're making the right decision because you're staying in school. And I'm like, in my head, I'm going, yeah, like I'm driving a brand new Durango outside, and I seen you roll in with a Honda Civic. Like you think, right? But on top of that, I made a really cool move. Is that because it was piecework and we were working with a union, I started a business, and
Mm,
in that business, it worked. Like I couldn't make this up if I tried, but how it worked out was my site that I was doing brand new homes, and I had worked all summer long in this site behind my high school. They were just building all the houses behind the high school. So, and I had got transferred to that high school, knowing that my site's right there, right? So worked all summer, like made a killing. Come September, I basically have to go to one or two classes, I think, a week, something like that. It was like part-time. And the coolest thing was one was English, and when I looked out the back window, I could see my guys working on the site
that's
behind me.
crazy.
So yeah, it was wild. I had my own van, like my own like tools, all my own setup, but I couldn't drive. I didn't have my driver's license yet,
What?
right? So my full driver's license. I had
Yeah,
my
yeah,
first
like a
driver's license,
restricted.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I had a brand new Durango,
So
and I
you
had
could drive,
yeah,
but someone had to be with you that was
right.
over
So
18.
so it was the most hilarious thing because my guys would drive me to school, drop me off,
Right.
okay,
And
because I
then
had
go
to
to
have
the
a
job
licensed
site.
driver. Then they go to the job site, carry on their day. I would come in and work till like 5 with them after school and everything, and then
Oh my
they drive
God.
me to the beer store, get me beer or whatever we needed for Friday. So it was and again, it just sometimes in life things work out because they're meant to work out,
Oh
and
my
that was one
God,
of the
that's
situations.
great.
Because I mean that kept like you couldn't ask for a better, like this was like, and again, it was like maybe 2 kilometers from my house. So like I had it really kind of made, and in a bad situation, it turned out really good. Like, I mean, again, it was one of those things I'm internally grateful for, because had the site been 30 or 40 kilometers away, I would have had a different, I would have had a lot more problems and issues. So I think it was life's way of giving me a break when that worked out. And I
Jesus,
rode
man.
that. I did graduate high school and finished up my high school. But I literally worked all the way through, right from, because my mom got sick at the end of, well, sick again at the end of grade 9. And then, all the way through high school, I was able to, keep that gig up and graduate on time. So yeah, it's, interesting
Jeez, oh
experience for sure.
man.
Yeah.
That is crazy. That's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
So you had a restricted license. You had a
Yeah.
business.
Mhm.
How did you have a business and you weren't 18 years old? That
So
was a
you
part of the
can, yeah,
program?
you can totally, no, you can register your own business at any age. You can
Huh.
be 5 years old and they'll let you register a business. So, and I was a subcontractor technically, right? But
Yeah.
how it worked was the union, um, and I'll never forget too. The only reason I got this gig is because I lied to the contractor that was, that has like a big union contractor, and I told them, oh, I'm
Yeah.
18, and they just assumed too. They never asked me for ID or anything,
Right.
but I was always worried when I would go in that they would ask me how old I was, and a couple
Right.
times they didn't. Like if you know me, like I am a terrible liar, so like I would tell them that like, oh, I'm 18, and they would look at me like, oh yeah, right. Like they thought I was older, so I was like, this is great. So they didn't know that I was actually younger. So like, but I would get caught in the lie, and I'd be like, yeah, yeah, and they're just like, okay, whatever. Like they're like, sure, you're 18, right? Like
Right. Can you
he's
do the
running a career,
job?
yeah, thinking I'm like 20 or something, and then like, no, actually, I'm 16. Like, so that went on, and again, even right, when I worked for that contractor, and through the union and stuff, we used to get big sites, and we had lots of success with him, and as I got to the point where I was going to technically start my own business, it was J Carter Roofing, all that stuff then, but you move from being the subcontractor to the contractor, so you start
Yeah.
contracting your own work, and I went to him and told him what I was going to do, and he's like, well, he's like, I'm afraid. And for a big union contractor, he's like, like, don't forget about us. And we
Yeah.
left on really, really amazing terms. And to this day, I still, chit chat with him here and there. But, you know, again, kind of a huge break. And he never knew,
Yeah.
he just thought I was, this, this, this young guy that was out, getting all this work done for him. So yeah, it was a good ride. It was a lot of, and you learn so much, right? Like,
Yeah.
again, there's no, you learn a lot about, and especially at an age when you're able to learn so easily, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that was, again, I attribute a lot of my success to the fact that first I learned to hustle very early on. I was pushed into working. I think
Yeah.
a lot of these kids are not nowadays, but I had a different reason, and I was really motivated, right? So most people were like, why are you in roofing? Like, you could have done. I was like, you know what, at the end of the day, I look back on everything that's happened, and I wouldn't want it any other way. The
Yeah.
simple reason is that, when you're doing a hard job, a hard, nasty job like that, and especially for guys that are in high school and stuff, that are young guys out there, there was a lot of, um, what would I call it? Like, everyone kind of looked down on me for it. You know what I mean? Like, it was like,
Really? Like your
oh yeah,
peers, like the other
oh
students?
yeah, like, even, yes, even that blew me away. Like my friends in high school were like, nobody was working, right? But I'm the only one with money, with a brand new truck, like with
Right.
everything. But it's
Right.
like I'm throwing my life away because I'm not going to college or university. And I was like, I always stopped and scratched my head. I'm like, you know what? I make more than your parents do
Right.
combined. To like, I don't think you really have a place to say that, right? Like, and I mean, again, but you always kind of keep that, keep that, to yourself. And again, I wish that and I think actually, you know what? As we go through the next few years, I think there's going to be a more pushback to guys in the trades. I think because where else, look at all the jobs that are going to be lost
Yeah.
to AI and technology and everything else. And again, it's a simple, like, you're not getting your job replaced if you're a roofer. Like, that's not happening for a long time,
Right.
right?
Right.
And what most people don't realize is it's a very good paying, like, in certain positions. And if you're good at what you do, like any trade, it's very good paying and it's
Yeah.
sustainable. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I hustled and worked really hard and, made really, really good money. But like, I know guys that were just day to day and they made good money. Right.
Yeah.
So, I wish there was some more promotion of that, and we see more of that in high schools where, the shop classes and stuff came back, because now they're realizing kind of the drawback to all that is that they told everyone to go to college and university and everything else. Now all my friends that still, believe it or not, okay, we're 36 years old. I still have friends that are like, they look down at me with a degree because they have a degree, and I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, you just finished paying that debt off.
It's
Like, I
crazy.
never had any debt. I never, like, I own, I was the first one to buy a house at like 19. Like, I've been ahead of you financially my entire life. But
Right.
for some reason, you think that I'm less smart or something like that, or that I was less, driven because you've got a degree. I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. And the funny part too is this particular friend I'm thinking of didn't even get a job for where they went to school for.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I think that story happens a lot, you know what I mean? Where we're told, hey, if at the time, again, it was like, if I didn't go to college or university, I was failing. You know what I mean? And
Right. Yeah.
if it won't lie, a lot of it felt like I was, but at the same time, it's like,
Sure.
wait a second, you kind of have to question that. So I mean, it's not maybe the pathway for everyone to take, because it was a lot of, learn the hard way. But again, as we need more and more trades, I think that, pushing them back to schools and getting people to drop I can't think of the word. I don't know why I can't think of it, but it's almost like
Like,
prejudice against the trade,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
The
like it's like a
stigma. That's what I
stigma.
meant to say.
Yeah.
You're right. So like again, a trade worker is somewhat less in social class than somebody with a degree, and it's absolute bullshit. Like, again, I know for all the guys that are out there probably experienced it themselves. Like, I know plumbers making 150 grand a year. I know
Right.
owners making over a million. Like, tell me that this was a bad career choice. In my own
Right.
business, I've done very good, and I own my home. I don't have any debt. That's I don't think very many people with the best of degrees and the best of jobs can say that, right? So
Oh no, for sure not.
it comes down to being proud of that and promoting it. And that's the other thing. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but like, maybe some of our listeners have at one point or another been shamed or felt shame that they were in the trades. I have never ever felt that myself internally, right? But I've
Yeah.
certainly had it placed on me for sure.
Yeah.
Like, and it's again, it's just that thing. Like, you go to a family event, or you go to a event at all, and you tell them what you do. I've always been very proud to kind of say what I did, and
Yeah.
never had an issue with it. But you could see it, just certain people would look down on it, and it's absolute bullshit. Now who's got the last laugh?
Right. Right. Because I mean, at the end of the day, green is, money. Like it doesn't really matter,
Right.
where the dollars come from. It all spends the same and it all invests the same, right? So
Right. Well, and again, if you look at some of these trades and where our trade problems are coming from, our labor shortages and quality of guys, and like, I hear this kind of stuff consistently over and over again from people that we have calls with, and people looking to use some of our systems and stuff. It's that they haven't kind of cleared it with themselves as well, right? Like, that we're high in demand, right? It's going to turn around, because we lived with the stigma of us just being trade workers or whatever. It's like, it's like a cop out, right? But that stigma has to really change, and it starts with how you view yourself, right? Like,
yeah.
how you see yourself and how you see your trades, and how you view your workers. If you think that your guys are a bunch of fall down drunks and
Right.
losers and drug addicts, well, guess what you're going to attract? Right.
Yeah.
That's if that's what your vision, or that's what your view is of the industry and the market, then that's what you're going to get.
It's interesting because, we were, today we're talking about transforming challenges into
Hmm.
success and collaborative success. And, interestingly, like I never, I went from a very, I don't know what to call it, sought after industry,
Hmm.
finance, high finance, to contracting, which, is for a lot of people, I mean, I've gotten a lot of like sideways, like cross-eyed looks from people
Yeah.
when I tell them, what I used to do. And I never felt, I always, like, I liked it, you know,
Right.
and I saw it as an opportunity to, like, take some of these skills and, like, really, take a business that had a, had a, was a, no, was not a healthy business, but like the, what the work we did was good,
Right.
right? Historical restoration. And so I was like, this is something we could really, there's something we could really build here, and so, it was, again, as a business, as an enterprise, it was not healthy, and it was
Hmm.
very in very bad shape. But I was like, and everybody, it was like, once the men got to know me and people got to know me, folks, I was like, they didn't complain at first because they didn't trust me and know me. Then they got to know me. And then it
Right.
was just like, every time I could show up to a job site, just this and this and this. But, but, I, instead of, cause other senior people in the business would, talk about the men in the field, and they'd be like, yeah, they're just, a bunch of spinsters, and they're,
Right.
they're like old ladies and blah, blah, blah. And I heard that, and I was like, but there's kind of a gift here, right? Because they are talking.
Hmm.
And so if I can just get them to talk to me, you know, take some of the, maybe take a little bit of, like, soften it up a little bit. You don't point it at me, but, like, tell me what's bothering you. Because the thing is that the things they were bitching about were real problems,
Hmm.
like, they were things that needed to be fixed. And so, my way of, like, taking that, so I wanted them to bitch. I just wanted them to do it in a way that we could solve the problems,
Right.
So, in a similar way, like, it's kind of, you took something that was a challenge, right, with your mother being sick and, like, having
Hmm.
to take on more responsibility, and then turned it into what's now a 8-figure business. And, I went in and I was like, okay, well, they're talking, so that's good. So let's look at, what's great about this. The men are talking. So let me get them to talk to me. Let me give them a forum to talk to me and to feel like they can talk to me, and then show them we're going to do something about it. And so, we started doing, shop meetings, which, I mean, again, someone out there is watching this going, like, you weren't doing shop meetings? No, we weren't doing shop meetings. The company wasn't doing shop meetings. And we were doing, the company was doing like 1.5 million, and they weren't doing shop meetings.
Hmm.
So we started doing shop meetings, and, like, every month. And I came with an agenda, and of course I would go over that, but then I would also ask for feedback. And
Right.
so we made our work orders got a whole lot better. In fact, I basically completely formed the work orders, and they actually worked. They were functional. It was a useful document that helped us to make money.
Right.
And it was like, I mean, literally just flipped it on its head. And something that, and, did guys still bitch on our jobs? Of course they did. Of course, of
Hmm.
course. But, you know, opening up that communication, and, to the CEO of the company, and me listening, even, I mean, even laborers would pull me aside and I would listen, now, and that worked. So,
Hmm.
I mean, it was a huge, like, you know, and I think it also, I mean, we're not talking about culture today, but it also improved the culture of the company, because, guys weren't like, when I would roll up on the job site, they weren't like, it didn't get weird, like it was, because they,
Right.
they saw me as, I don't want to say, like, yeah, I was the boss, but I was also a collaborator, like, I'd come in and I would ask questions, and I was honest about what I didn't fucking know, because that was a
Right.
lot, you know, and so I would, so anyway, so I think that, and we were talking about this, I don't know, you and I talked about this a few weeks ago about collaboration,
Hmm.
and how that's, how there's so much, like, where we're going, we have to collaborate more,
Yeah.
like, all of us, right?
Well,
Whether
well,
it's,
so yeah, go ahead.
no, I was done. Yeah. We have to
Yeah,
collaborate
now
more
that
is
I
what I was saying. Yeah.
interrupted. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, here's an interesting thing when you bring up collaboration, that I've gotten to see, being a millennial. Again, I kind of speak on both sides. Like, I was very much taught by the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, and and that's kind of the world I came up in. But what I found is very interesting is that millennials down, highly collaborative, highly
Yeah.
collaborative. They are more willing to work as a team because that's what's taught in school,
Yep.
right? The education
That's right.
system has brought it to that point where we have like they are brought into, and I think a lot of contractors miss that and really identify that as conflict versus a way to actually work themselves out of having to be a babysitter full time. They put themselves in that position because you hear it, right? It's the
Yeah.
paradigms. Oh, I can't find good guys. I don't trust these guys. Well, if you really look at it, you're a micromanager, right?
Right.
And you're not asking your team to solve a problem. You're not asking your team or challenging your team to, think on their own. You're actually creating the problem yourself by your management style, right? And I think a lot of problems that I had in my business, if I'm being honest, got solved by other people, not me, right? And it was,
Yeah.
in fact, using a lot of the younger guys that were willing to collaborate, willing to, take action and come up with solutions that the business really started to solve its own and be what I call self-healing,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yeah.
really, again, you can take a bad situation, and we've had plenty of them, right? And in my business, we have a rule is, essentially, I don't care if there's a problem. And I got one particular one that is just popping in my head, so I'm going to share it. But I remember we were doing a big siding project, and we had two crews on the job, and one crew starts on one end, one crew starts on the other end. Well,
Yeah.
it turns out that they were doing all of their corners and everything else differently, right? So the result was the client shows up, loses his mind. Our superintendent goes out there, just shakes his head because
Right.
we had rushed onto the job, just looked like
Knucklehead.
dummies.
Yeah.
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 So we
Yeah.
have to take off all the siding around one side, but
Yeah.
they were literally like, they got to the end of the job and then it's like half and half, and everyone was like pumped that they got it done, but we have to go take the whole one half off.
Right.
And it's substantial. It's probably like 20K. It was all locking panels, so it all was garbage. We had to rip it off.
Oh
And
man.
instead of going out like most bosses would and start yelling and screaming, I basically brought everybody in from that job site, and I had them tell me how we were going to prevent this problem from ever happening
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And I told them, like, we're going to do a lessons learned, okay, but you're going to solve this problem. And what they came back to me was actually pretty brilliant. Is on the work orders, we could just have a slide that gives the detail for the specific job, and everyone
Yep.
is always on the same page, whether it's a brand new subcontract, doesn't matter. So it was like an SOP, but it was built right in our work orders, and you could see it or not see it if you've already
Yeah.
got it, but you agree to those specific details, and they were all our standard details, but it's right in the work order. So anybody, if you're new, brand new, first day, like, you've accepted it, like you had to
Right.
actually say, I accept these, so it could never happen again. And it's never happened again. So
Yeah.
again, something like that has probably saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars, because it happens so often. Like, again, these little tiny things that you're constantly having to deal with. And a lot of contractors, again, they make the same mistakes over and over. I know I was guilty when I first was
Yeah.
going, like, I mean, it's just so hard because you have so many things going on, right? Where I just showed you an example of how you can push it to the team. Hey, we made a mistake. Everyone knows it's a fuck up,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But
Yep.
how do you handle it? How do you turn it to something that is useful and is going to serve the business, and keep it off of you, right? Instead of you going in and putting out the fire and being
Right.
the full-time firefighter, hat wearer, everything else. Stop. Be Take that step. And again, younger generation, and I'm not saying all baby boomers or Gen Xers are not willing to, but I found a lot more resistance there. They would blame, and like it was very hard. Like, training was like
Yeah.
out of the question. Where
Yeah.
now with the millennial group, one of the benefits is I can have them be like, you guys are all going to put your heads together and solve this problem, and you're going to come back to me with the answer.
Well, so two things. One, I'm Gen X, but I'm a younger Gen Xer. I think, which is
Okay.
probably why you and I get along so
Yeah.
well, because I'm more like a millennial half the
Mm,
time. But as a Gen Xer though, like a lot of my men were Gen X, right?
right.
And what I saw is that they they're definitely less collaborative
Hmm.
than millennials, right? In fact, and that was a lot of the tension, right, between
And
my
millennials and them definitely don't collaborate. They
yeah,
don't
my
work together
senior
well.
Xers, I mean, this one guy was like,
Hmm.
look, I don't mind if you scream at people, like if they really, like don't do it all the time. Some people deserve it, but let's take it easy on the young guys. Cause he was always, it was like the young guys he was always pointing at.
Right.
But I saw that once I proved myself to
Hmm.
the Gen X, my Gen X people, then they collaborated with me, right? Then they worked with me. And then they would work with, then there was a lot more, I don't want to use a fancy word, but cohesion, like the guys, the senior, like the older, physically actual older guys, like Gen Xers worked better with the millennials. And there was a lot more,
Mm.
there was a lot more cohesion, like a lot better, on the job sites and so on. When one, I proved to them, like I would collaborate with them, like I did it with them, and
Hmm.
treated them like equals, right?
Yep.
And like tell me something, you fucked up on something, and I would listen, and I wouldn't get upset, and I wouldn't, punish them for it. But the other thing I was going to point out too is, you said something about, I can't remember what you said, but like one of the things that when I first came into the business, everybody told me in the front office, because there's always this like front office, feel
Hmm.
tension. I did everything I could to like, get rid of that shit. But one of the things that the front office, like the original estimator, he told me, and other people would tell me that like that like we can't trust the men. We can't trust the men. We can't trust the field.
Wow.
And
Wow.
And so I just decided, so first of all, so I built these bridges, right? Like I was
Yeah.
saying, like with the communication and showing them that they could trust me and so on and so forth. So kind of built those bridges, built those relationships. And then like I told them, like on our work orders, you could see the exact time budget, like how many days this job was. And
Hmm.
every like all basically like the whole like budget was there, as far as,
Hmm.
and then my senior guys, I would tell them how much we had in the job, like dollars and cents. I would tell them this is a $400,000 job. We got X amount of cost. So we need to bring it in these days. And if we bring it ahead, then we qualify for the profit share. And so I would
Right.
be really, really transparent with them. And you know what? They didn't take advantage of it. They didn't
Right.
slack off. They didn't fuck around. They got it done and brought the job in less time. And did
Hmm.
and then and we were doing this because you saw our numbers. I was doing 75 to 80% gross profit on my jobs.
Hmm.
For real. No bullshit. I still have the spreadsheets.
Yeah. So I
That was
always
the
find that,
result.
it's again, we get back to bare bones with that one, because I bet you most of the listeners out there don't do the first thing, and that's put up the scoreboard. You can't manage what you can't measure,
Right.
right?
Right.
How many of them are just sending their fucking guys out to these jobs with no work order, no timelines,
Right.
no, and then when they don't come in on budget, they act surprised, like I
Yeah,
can't
they
find good
scream at
guys. The
me.
guys are screwing me, like blah blah
Yeah.
blah. No, it's you get
I
what
don't
you put
know.
out,
Yeah.
right? If you, and I always explain it like this, and you probably heard me, so you'll just roll your eyes at me, but it's like playing a game of hockey, right? If we go out and I tell you, hey Drayton, let's go play a game of hockey, but hey, guess what? There's no net. We're not going to keep score. All right. And,
Right.
we're going to use our, we're,
Yeah, we're just
we're,
gonna go in circles.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You can only skate one way.
Right.
So it gets to the point where when you point these things out, they're like, well, it can't possibly be that. And they look for
Right.
other excuses like, hey, it's these young guys that nobody shows up to work. No, to be honest with you, it's actually just you, right? Like,
Right.
and the fact you won't collaborate and you
Right.
won't work with your men, and you won't, like, again, how many of you guys have guys you haven't spoken to in years? I
Right.
know, again, it's quite possible for a lot of owners to have guys on their crews that are just there and they don't do reviews, they don't engage with them, they don't worry, like they don't care about them personally, and like that, you get back what you put out, right? You want somebody to come to work for you, and again, you don't challenge them, you just, there's no consequence for doing a shit job and there's no reward for doing a great job.
Right.
What are you going to get? Right? You're never
Right.
going to get just a great job all the time. Like that's going to come to an end. So I think a lot of the problems that we face as an industry come from the owners themselves not willing to collaborate, not willing to work or give up controls, or, getting outside of their own damage from coming through the trades, that,
That's
the
right.
shut up and work mentality. And, that guys were just supposed to go and work and work and work until they die. And then, that was it. Right.
Right.
So I think, again, the reflection needs to be back on the owners themselves to really sort out where their problems are coming from and why they can't attract new workers, why they can't retain new workers, why they can't, turn conflict into an opportunity. Like, these are all things that require collaboration. They're all things
Right.
that require you to get outside of your ego. All right. Leave that at the door, go and work with them, and again, you will find that a lot of them are, they know what the answers are, and they're willing to do the work. Like, they didn't,
Right.
if they're working for you, like, nobody wants to show up and work for a contractor that's failing. Right. And that's again, the
Yeah.
mindset has to change, because if you're thinking those things, that you can't trust your guys, they're not smart enough to do, I've got to babysit, that's exactly what you're going to get.
Right.
Right. You're going to get guys that are depending on you. Now, if you go in and being like, okay, we've got this problem, we've got this challenge, I'm not going to do all the work in it. I'm not going to be the only one that puts out a fire. I'm not going to be the one frustrated, angry, and pissed off at the end of the day. Well, my guys, I enable them to continue to do the same thing over again. By
Right.
doing that, I'm going to take it back, and I'm going to look at ways that I can involve them in that decisions part of it, involve them in the learning part of it. All right. And get them thinking, like, using their heads. All right. Because then they become engaged. Right. Even a
Yeah.
negative situation, you can turn to, how do I get them engaged? How do I, and again, a good example, when problems happen, when mistakes are made, stop,
Right.
get everyone to agree on the lesson learned. All right. And how are they going to prevent it from happening again? Then put those things in place, and you'll start to see immediate improvement. Start keeping score. Right.
Yeah.
Start pulling your budgets out, talking with your guys, doing the review. Those, we call them Monday morning meetings, but that's essentially to, set the score. Tell them, here's where we're at, here's the scoreboard, and having them to think themselves on how they're going to get to the, to the end line. Right. Or else you do it the other way, and we can act like it's 1951 and just, go out and do it, and just make it happen. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's also going to that's going to have a consequence, right?
All the
And
time. And
people are
again,
paying that right now. They're paying. I mean, there are people right now paying for that, like that mentality.
right. And it's going to continue to be ineffective. Right. And I think what we're really seeing is not so much a labor shortage as much as we have a social problem, in that, again, we've got a lot of older owners that are refusing to change their ways or to adapt to a new thought process that's come through. And again, it's been happening for decades. The school system changed, that, like, everything you do in a school system now requires you to collaborate with classmates, with everyone else, where, it's not like the textbook education system as much. They altered that. And as a result, again, we're seeing different attributes come out. Right.
Yeah.
And we're calling them poorly, because we're attributing them to them not wanting to work. And that's the thing that kind of bugs the shit out of me a lot. Now, there is definitely, just like in the baby boomer generation and the Gen Xer, there were guys that just didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. They were just not good workers. That's the same situation we have now. Okay. The difference is that some of them are getting classified earlier on, because,
Right.
again, they're showing up to the job sites, and again, our Gen Xers are labeling them as being lazy or incompetent or whatever. But
Right.
it's just, no, you're not connecting with them, and you're not really looking at the opportunity and trying different things to get them, involved, trying to get them
Yeah.
engaged. Right.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
That was just
Absolutely.
a heavy rant. Sorry about that.
It would.
I didn't realize. I was like, oh shit, that was like a 15-minute rant.
But these are the things that, I mean, this is where people live, right?
Mhm.
And I was working next to other subs, or had subs working for me, where you could see, like, the different, like, the division, like the
Oh yeah.
difference in the way we were running our business and they were running their business,
Mhm.
and it's the easiest trope, give like the easiest, like laziest excuse is what I'm trying to say, is that, as a Gen Xer, and and I did this myself. I try not to do it anymore, but looking at a millennial and being like, they're lazy,
Hmm.
um, because
It's a cop out.
because they're not like us. And here's the thing, you know, that's like the generational differences aren't going away, right?
No.
We are the way we are.
Hmm.
Millennials are the way, I mean, I'm saying Gen Xers, millennials are the way they're going to be. And then the younger generation, the Gen Z, they're the way they're going to be. That's not going to
Right.
change, right?
Nope.
So we can either fight that force or we can adapt, right? And figure out how we can work together. Because the thing is that, like, there's two sides to every coin, right? So there's the
Absolutely.
challenge, there's the shit side, but then on the other side, there's a shiny side. So what's the gift? Where's the,
Hmm.
like, there's an upside to this if you just step into it, right?
Right. Yeah, well, and that's it. It's about the willingness to do that though, right? And I
Yeah.
think that, a lot of contractors are going to get to that point where, for I've seen big companies come to us and, looking for our help, and we've had to turn them away because they're just not willing to change that part, right? Where they're willing to accept that, hey, you know what? We can't just, hire guys and expect them to go and work their lives away without creating a pathway, without, educating them, without, you know, creating these systems in our company that allow them to engage and to contribute and to have impact, right? If you just want the guy that shows up, does his job, well, that's the dream, right? They're like
Right.
robots. They don't
Right.
exist.
Yeah.
And they're not going to
No.
for any time soon, right?
No.
They didn't exist back then either,
No.
right? They
No.
didn't. The only reality is that there was more people in the system that were interested in the trades. That's the big difference, right?
No.
So, we don't have that anymore. So now we have to be creative. And again, for contractors that are really struggling right now, I gave you some good examples today of how you take that struggle and turn that around into a triumph moment, right? To understanding this communication change and understanding where the gaps are in your own business, right? Take the younger guys, take them aside, and when we do have problems, let them solve it, let them come up with the solutions. Give your guys a little bit more trust and freedom, and I mean, to a certain extent, right? Trust but always check is my rule of thumb. And again, try to watch the micromanaging, because that's not an effective method in any business, and a lot of us do it. We do it by accident, but it's something, again, if you're not going to let somebody learn, and mistakes are a part of learning, then essentially you're going to get guys that are just dependent and afraid to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So we got to really look at ourselves. And again, I've always felt, like I said, my rule is we can make mistake once, right? It's the second time around that I'm going to, that we're going to start really looking carefully and seeing what we have to dramatically change as a result. The
Yeah.
first time, shit happens, right? Mistakes
Yeah.
happen, but we're not going to do it twice.
One of the things that I love about what fucking things up is that, like, failure is the
It's the only
most
way you get.
information rich,
Hmm.
like, experience, right? That we have. And so, one of the things, and because I failed so much in my first 2 years in contracting,
Hmm.
I had a lot of information rich experiences. But, like, when we look at it, like, I started looking at, and this is sort of my final thought here today. Like, when I started looking at those failures as, like, stuff there, like, I know there's something in here that if I
Hmm.
pull it out, like, this failure, this loss actually is more like an investment, right?
Yep.
So I can take this thing that, like, right now is hard and expensive and it's making it hard. And maybe I didn't collect a paycheck for a month or a few weeks or whatever. And, like, I can take this, and if I solve the puzzle and I pull the information out that can help me figure out, like, what we're not doing right, and then I do this enough times, I'll find there's a pattern there. And
Hmm.
then I mean, I did that, and then it was like, oh yeah, okay, so we shouldn't take jobs that are more than like 80 miles away from our shop,
Right.
because it's not hard to staff them, but it's hard to get stuff to them. We shouldn't do jobs that are like public jobs and historical, and have like multiple people, like multiple decision makers. We shouldn't do this. And so all of a sudden I built this, like, box of like, we're not doing this ever, right? Like a
Right.
customer blacklist. And so, like there's, so again, my final thought is like, these challenges, like they're like these problems, these failures, whatever you want to call them, those are the gifts, right? Because there's the like information in there. Like if we pull it out and we use it,
Mhm.
like that's the secret to like turning it around.
Yeah, well, and
Final
again, it's,
thoughts?
we can always, yeah, absolutely. We can always take a negative and turn it into a positive, right? It's like, again, it's the refusal to do that. All right. And it's the enabling behavior that we often get into because we're busy, stressed. Oh, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. And then
Yeah.
what's that do to an owner? Now he's running around doing $20 an hour tasks because he
Right.
refuses to let that failure happen, or, find somebody that's accountable, or mentor somebody that's going to, fit into that role. And they just continue to add work onto their own plate. Whereas it's much easier. And again, I'll be a standing witness. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I don't have all the answers. My
Yeah.
job's actually not
I
even
don't
to
know.
be right. My
Right.
job's to get it right. And I think, the more that contractors recognize this and recognize that your job's to build up your team. You're not, again, as you scale and you grow in your business, you realize very quickly that you're one person with only so many hours in the day,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So when something is not working, okay, or your team is failing, all right, you can't just blame the team and like leave it as is. You gotta go in and be the facilitator for solving the problem, right? Even if you have the answer to solving the problem, a lot of guys go in and, well, stupid, why didn't you do it like this? I would have done it like that. Gets you nowhere, because what's that dude tell your team? Oh, I can't make decisions on my own, right? I shouldn't think for myself. That's what it's telling them. I'm gonna, because you came in and you put your presence on it, right? And didn't turn it around on everyone's and have them absorb the
Right.
the responsibility, that now you're left with it on your shoulders. And if it goes wrong, which it will, right?
Right.
Then you, like, again, it's like building a fragile child. You know what I mean? Like, you keep scolding the kid until he's not confident, then you're going to get an unhappy child that's not confident, right? So you
Right.
have to think of your staff the same way. And when mistakes happen, that's the best time for you to show leadership and to really take a bad situation, no matter what it is. You can turn around it as a lesson, and your job is to do that as the owner and CEO of your business. Your job is to do that, is to take those lessons and make sure you're leading your team to a better destination, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's the, I mean, and it's hard to do at first,
It is, but it gets way easier because
but yeah.
yeah, it's way easier now. It's to the point where, like, people don't even come to me with the problems. They know
Right.
better, right? Because I've instilled
Yeah.
those things. Like, we're problem solvers, we're not problem
Well,
finders.
that's the thing. It's hard to do at first because
Mhm.
my people were super critical. They didn't think,
Yep.
they thought this was bullshit. This was a move or something. But
Hmm.
then they saw that I was consistent with it.
Yep.
And also like I took responsibility because, I mean, I fucked things, even though I was running these millions of dollars in jobs, these big commercial, historical, I blew it sometimes. So I was like,
Hmm.
sorry, I fucked that. I'm really sorry, and I would
Yep.
take ownership. So I got there. So that also, so they realized this is not just a thing or a move or this is like, he's for real about this. And then they bought in. And then, like you said, they started solving them. And I wasn't even in the conversation. Right.
And that's
And then my
it's
men would tell me afterwards, hey, we figured this thing out. Like, we were doing this job, replacing stairs and simple thing, right? And so we were like, so we're struggling with this big grade. It was, they called it the stairway to hell on this local college, but really cool job. And anyway, and they figured out, we built a system using, we took not culverts, but like plastic, like big conduit, cut it in half, and we created like basically a transportation system. And I didn't do anything. I did
Mhm.
nothing. They built the whole, like solved all, because we're not demo people, so we don't have those.
Yep.
Anyway, point is like I didn't have to like think of, I was like, man, I don't got to solve this. I don't got to, because they were just doing it themselves. Right.
Right?
So anyway,
It's because you gave
so
them the power to do so, right?
yeah, so I just empowered them and trusted them. And so anyway, so my final thought is, like it's, problems are only problems as long as we see them that way. When we
Mm-hmm.
decide that like actually this problem could be something else, it could be an opportunity, it could be an investment, it could be something that we can all learn from and make the business better, it becomes that. That's my
That's right.
final thought. What's yours today?
I love it. Yeah, that's actually my final thought. I'll rest on that one too. I agree with you. 100%.
So we are here every Friday talking about this stuff, talking about these plays, talking about the strategies. Obviously, we've got tons and tons of solutions, and we're talking about some of those in the group. But our purpose in being here is to bring value, and we want to talk about things that are meaningful to all of you. So again, I'm going to say, if there's anything that someone, if you want to hear about something, or you want to be in the conversation, or drop a comment, drop us a DM, and we are into it. As you can tell, Jay and I are both extremely passionate about this. We fucking love this shit.
Can rant about it.
And yeah, I mean, we're fighting to keep these things under an hour, because we could literally talk about this for 3-4 hours. Now, we know nobody would show up for that, but
Yeah.
we could have the conversation and piss off our families. So anyway, so we're here every Friday, 3 p.m. and we want feedback. And again, we want to know what you want to hear about. So again, if there's something that you want to hear about, want to talk about, drop a comment in the chat, or again, send a DM to the group, and we'll incorporate it. So thanks for being with us, and we will see you again next Friday, 3 p.m.
Talk soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.